For quick background info, I was 12 years old when this occurred. I'm 14 now. I have 2 younger brothers. For the sake of this story, we'll call them Dylan and Tyler. They share a room on the 2nd floor, and the room is at the front of the house with a balcony door facing the street. Straight behind their room is a hallway, and my room is on the left of that hallway if you're looking from the front of the house. There's 2 windows facing the side of my house and my room. At the time of this story, I was in my brother's room watching Tyler play a video game. I think it was Cuphead. This will be important later. This took place in mid-July of 2019. It was nearing the end of the day. I and my mom had decided to order in for herself and my dad. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, about 10 minutes later, my mom randomly starts walking in my brother's room and looking at the shutters on the door. Me and my brothers don't really pay any attention until we notice she keeps doing it, and she looks much more nervous than normal. My brothers ask what's wrong, and my mom surprisingly, and she tells us that the delivery driver was sending her really weird messages, such as, "God is coming. He will come for all who don't believe. Believe, and he'll bring you to paradise." Tyler was starting to get nervous, but I was much more confused than anything. But that confusion turned to fear, as not even 3 minutes later, this delivery driver was right outside our house, empty-handed, screaming and laughing, obviously high off his mind. At this point, Tyler was nearly in tears, and I was absolutely horrified, but I didn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. But as quickly as he came, he was gone. My mom filed a complaint with both the restaurant and the delivery service, and the next day she was notified that he had been terminated. That in and of itself wouldn't be that bad, but it gets worse. Now for this next part. I can't confirm that these 2 events were related, but the timing suggests it was. The day my mom was notified of the delivery driver's termination went on like normal, and around 10:30 p.m., I was the only person awake. This was pretty customary. My brothers like going to bed early, and I think my parents were asleep, but I can't be sure. Anyways, around that time, I noticed out my window the motion light turn on. At first I thought it was the neighbors, but I realized soon that it was ours. And the thing about our motion sensor light is that something pretty noticeable has to trigger it. Something like a mouse won't. I looked outside and I didn't see anything until I looked to my right, just out of the light's radius. That's when I noticed something. Someone. Then I realized someone is in my backyard and I'm the only one awake. It didn't even occur to me that I could wake up my parents, but instead, I dug down under the window, praying whoever was out there didn't see me. I'm honestly astounded that 12-year-old me didn't even scream. But I think he noticed me, because when I checked again about 5 minutes later, he was gone. I'm 99% sure that it was the same guy, and he was either scouting out the place or trying to scare us. But thankfully, nothing else happened after that. I only remembered this recently because my mom brought it up, and all of the memories of it came flooding back. So to the crazy high screaming delivery driver that I'm nearly positive was trying to break in, stay the fuck away from me and my family. This happened during autumn of 2013. I was working as a delivery boy for a pizza place. I lived in southern Ontario, in a fairly modestly sized city. I was doing what was possibly the longest drive that I'd ever taken for a delivery. It was in the middle of a forested area about 25 minutes away from the place I worked at. The place that I worked for is on the outskirts of the city, so it wasn't really unusual for us to get rural deliveries. When I finally pulled up to the address in question, it was an old disheveled, dilapidated house, totally surrounded by forest. I called on my boss and I asked him twice just to make sure this is the correct address. I could tell he was in a crappy mood, so I didn't want to bother him any further. I just took a deep breath and then walked to the front door of the house. There was no doorbell, so I decided to knock loudly just to make sure that the residents heard me. No response. I waited for about a minute before knocking again, saying that I was the pizza guy. Still no response. As I began to turn around to get back to my car, I saw a pair of eyes from an open window, staring intently and directly at me. After about 5 seconds of that person staring at me so eerily, I just dropped the pizza and ran back to my car. The damn thing wouldn't turn on until I turned my keys for the 3rd time. I didn't get too far away from the house when the car then began jolting. Then an awful screeching sound started, forcing me to stop the car. When I got out and looked at my tires, my blood froze. Just what I had feared. All 4 of the tires were slashed. I thought to myself, who the fuck did this? I mean, I saw that person in the window while I was at the front door. I then went back to my car and called the emergency services. I explained my situation to them to the best of my ability. The operator then told me that the police would be there in about half an hour. I then asked her if it would be best to stay in the car or run away. She said that it would probably be best to stay in my car. I waited anxiously for the police to arrive while I was still on the line with the operator. What happened next utterly broke me, and I truly hope that nobody else ever has to experience this level of fear. While I was examining my surroundings, I looked in the overhead mirror and I saw that same person before that was in the open window, right in the middle of the road behind my car. I could tell now that it was a man, eyes open even wider than before. Then I could ever so slightly see a demented smile then spread across his face. I just swung open the door and fled into the woods, not giving a second crap about me and my life. I ran until I was nearly out of breath, then hid behind a log and some shrubs. I waited for what felt like an hour until I finally heard a siren wailing in the distance. I gathered all the stamina I had left and ran back to my car. By the time I got back, police were inspecting my car. I ran to them shouting for help like a lunatic. I fell to the ground and then coughed from running so much. 2 officers then picked me up and questioned me. I told them the situation, and they sent most of the officers in the house, but one stayed with me for company. Eventually the officers came out with a knife, obviously the one used to slash my tires. One officer said that it was probably some sick insane couple who did this, given that I saw the man. Unfortunately, they were never found, and that still really pains me to this day. I obviously quit my job right after that, and I began working in a department store in the city. But I'll never forget the look on that man's face when he stared at my car in the pitch black darkness. Hello. Before I start this story, I want to give you a backstory real quick. I'm an 18-year-old female living in Mesa, Arizona. I had started door dashing to make some extra money, as working a hostess really wasn't paying the bills like it used to. My little sister, who's 16, and my mom and I had just moved down here from Phoenix, so this is somewhat of a different area to DoorDash in than I'm used to. We started off doing a couple of runs around the area until I got a ping that I have a new order. It was for Little Caesars. I pulled up the map and I headed that way. When we arrived, I had sent in my sister to get the order. While she was in there, I was looking around the parking lot. It was pitch black outside, other than my headlights and the store sign. I noticed a white Jeep and a few teenage guys getting inside of it. I didn't pay much attention afterwards. When my sister got back in the car with the order, I proceeded to the delivery address, with my sister talking to me and music blaring. I pulled into the neighborhood that the map took me to. I then turned down the music to look for the house. We stopped in the middle of the street in front of the house, not realizing that a guy was coming to my door. Now, he didn't say anything at first. I said, "Did you order DoorDash?" And he said, "Yeah," with a little hesitation. I looked behind him, and I saw that there were 2 other guys heading towards my driver's side door as well. I didn't notice that they had just pulled into the driveway, and they were driving a white Jeep. Before I go any further, my boyfriend has a switchblade knife that he always carries around, so I automatically know the sound of it being opened and closed. After he said yes, I noticed that he got closer to my window, and I was looking at my phone about to ask him what the name for it was. And when I looked back at him, he was fiddling in his pocket on his right side. He kept looking back and nudging his head forward, kind of in a motion like, "Come here," to the other guys. All of a sudden, when I was about to roll my window down to give him his order, I heard the click, and that's when my brain just pieced it all together. He gave me a weird look, and I said, "You know what, fuck this." And I rolled up my window to where there was about an inch until it was closed, and then locked all the doors and took off. I didn't hear anything from them. They didn't yell out for us. I was really freaking out, and my sister didn't know why I pulled off like that. I explained to her what I heard, and then she pieced it all together as well. When I turned off their street, they then called me and said, "Yeah, this is Mario." And I said, "Yeah, are you the guy I just talked to?" And he said, "Yeah." And then I asked him why I heard a switchblade go off in his pocket, but he ignored the question. I asked him again, and it sounded like he was rushing to get into a car. I then pulled off into a curb, and I told him where he could pick up his food, and then hung up. We sat at the other end of the street for 10 minutes, and when we went back, the food was still there. We picked up the food again, and I was just going to call DoorDash and tell them what happened, and ask that they get a refund, until I saw the teenagers pass by and look straight at me and stop the car. I turned super quickly in the other direction, and I saw one of them get out of the car, then jump back in, and they then turned around and started following us. Now, I'm a crazy driver in general, but when someone's following me, my fight or flight kicked in, and I lost them pretty quickly. I called DoorDash and explained to them what happened and made a report. I don't know what those teenagers were up to, but as a female out at night with her little sister, I was terrified. Not just for me, but for my sister. Some of you may think that I was being overdramatic, and maybe they did just want their food, but if you were in my situation, what else could you really do? It was my safety and my sister's. I called up my boyfriend and told him everything that happened, and I couldn't stop shaking for the rest of the drive home. I couldn't ever figure out why they were at Little Caesars and got there before us. I know it was them who was there. Maybe they were following me back. Maybe not. I guess I'll never know. On the other hand though, I didn't call the cops. There probably wasn't much they could have done anyways, except for file a report. But let's just say, I'll never DoorDash in that area again.
I am a driver for DoorDash. This happened just a couple of months ago. It was a Thursday night and I was working late. I typically worked until 2 a.m. on Thursdays, and they would be a pretty good money-making night for me. It was late and I was almost done, but at about 1:30 in the morning, I got an order to pick up. It was at McDonald's and it was just a medium drink. It seemed a little weird to me that somebody would have just a drink from McDonald's delivered, but I wasn't going to question it. I went to McDonald's and picked it up. Then I drove to the destination. It wasn't that far, between 5 and 10 minutes away, but when I got into the neighborhood, I could see that it wasn't the best area. The houses looked very run down and old, and the grass in most yards was very long. I turned onto a dead-end road and finally reached the address. It was at the end of the dead end, and I could barely see the house because of how dark it was, combined with how many trees they had in the yard. There was a woods surrounding the house, and no street lights or house lights. I slowly stopped my car and got out. I looked around. It was very quiet. I walked to the end of the driveway of the house and looked down it. It was skinny, but fairly long. It had pine needles and sticks all over it, and looked like it didn't get much use. I looked down and saw the house, and then I began walking. I got about 10 feet down the driveway, and then I heard the branches in a tree next to me start to move. Immediately when I heard the sound, I knew it couldn't have been an animal and had to be a human. Without even thinking, I placed the drink on the ground, turned around, and ran back to my car. As I was running, I heard movement behind me, but I didn't stop to look. I ran all the way back to my car and got inside. When I did, I immediately started my engine, and the lights to my car came on. Out of my windshield, I saw in front of my car about 30 feet away, there were 3 men. They were not chasing me anymore, but they were just standing at the end of the driveway looking at me. Then one of them turned and threw the McDonald's drink at my car. It hit the ground about 5 feet in front of my vehicle. I backed up my car and drove away. I hope I don't have to deliver to that neighborhood again. A couple of years back, I worked as a Postmates delivery driver on the weekends. I lived in a city at the time, so I could ride my bike to make the deliveries. I liked it because I could get more exercise. One night, on a nice Friday night in the summer, I was working for a few hours. I remember it was sunny and warm. At about 8 p.m., I got a delivery for an order of a sub restaurant. I rode my bike and picked it up, and then I rode to the address. When I arrived at the address, it was an apartment building on the edge of the city next to a park. I got off my bike and walked up to the front door. After a couple of minutes went by and nobody came, I texted the man and said I was there. A few seconds later, I got a response. He asked if I could bring it up to his room on the 2nd floor, and he said he would buzz me in. I didn't mind at all, and I said that I would. The man let me in, and I walked up the stairs to the 2nd floor and to the room he told me. I knocked on the door. The man opened it and smiled. He seemed very friendly. He said thank you to me and mentioned that he would give me a nice tip. Then I heard a woman's voice say thank you as well, coming from inside the room. I said no problem, and I left. Then I walked back down and outside of the apartment to my bike and continued with my deliveries for the evening. About 2 hours later, I got another delivery near the same area, and my route took me past that same park. But as I rode past the apartment building, I noticed an ambulance and several police cars outside of it. I was going to ignore it and ride past when I caught a glimpse of the man that I had delivered to. He was being led into a cop car. I had to stop my bike quick and ask what happened. I didn't get much information, but I did hear that a man had nearly killed a woman. Later, when I went home, I found out that the very same man I had delivered to was with a woman that night that he met for the first time, and he tried to force himself on the woman, and she resisted. That started a struggle between them, and the woman ended up breaking her arm and being knocked unconscious. The man was arrested, and the woman was taken to the hospital. It's crazy to me that I delivered to them, and they both seemed so happy just a few hours before. When I was a senior in high school, I worked as a pizza delivery boy. It was a pretty good paying job with tips, and I enjoyed it a lot. One night on a Friday, I was working and got a delivery for one pizza to a house on the other end of town. I made the drive to the house, which took about 10 minutes, and then I arrived. I stepped out of the car and started to walk up to the house. It was a small and average-looking house, kind of old, nothing eye-catching. I walked to the front door, but when I got there, I noticed a post-it note stuck to the door that said to use the back. I walked around to the back door of the house, which was located in the center of the house in front of a small fenced backyard with a little patio on it. I was about to knock on the door when I saw another post-it note. It said, "Please bring pizza inside." Now this made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I decided to go in anyways. I could hear music playing from inside the house. When I opened the door, I saw what appeared to be a kitchen. It was pretty empty though. There was no food or plates out, but on the kitchen table near the door, there was a Bluetooth speaker that was playing music. I started to place the pizza box on the table, and I saw yet another sticky note posted there. It said, "Bring pizza downstairs and I will give you your tip." I looked to the end of the kitchen and saw an open doorway with a staircase leading to a very dark basement. This is where I had to draw the line in my head. I decided I would have to skip the tip on this one, and I was not going to go down the stairs. I left the pizza on the table and started to walk away to leave. But then, the music on the speaker stopped playing, and a deep man's voice started speaking on it and said, "Stop." Then it said, "Why don't you come downstairs?" I wasn't going to stay there any longer, and I quickly opened the door and left. When I did, I could hear the deep man's voice laughing. I ran back to my car and drove all the way back to the restaurant. A few weeks later, when I was working, I got a delivery, and when I started driving, I noticed it was the address of that creepy house again. I really did not want to go back there, but it was my job, and I didn't want to tell my boss I was scared, so I continued driving. Once I arrived, I took a good look at the house. I could see a note was on the door again. I sat in my car for a good minute, hyping myself up to go back to the house. I finally got out and started walking straight to the back, but when I noticed the front door, the sticky note said something different on it this time. I walked up to the front door and looked closer. The note said, "Come in the front door this time," and then it had a smiling, winking face on it. I just dropped the pizza on the front step and knocked on the door 2 times and then left. I hurried back to my car, got in, and drove back to the restaurant again. Thankfully, I never had to deliver to that house again.
So I just moved to California about 4 months ago, and everything's been pretty much a dry run for the worst. My car got rear-ended, my living situation absolutely sucks, and I'm now more broke than I've ever been in my life. I've also had some pretty creepy experiences out here that have definitely forced me to be more on my guard. I come from a small town where you can walk the streets at 2 in the morning and arrive home in one piece. But I now live in a really large part of LA where you have to keep your eyes peeled 24/7. It also doesn't really help that I watch a lot of crime shows and have now become terrified to leave my apartment after these following events. The first happened to my rental car that I was given due to my car accident. I was a full-time DoorDash driver trying to make ends meet in an attempt to squirrel away some cash, as I knew I'd be relying on Lyft rides and would need basic things such as groceries when my time with the rental eventually ran out. My DoorDash shifts typically ran from early in the morning to late in the evening, as LA gas prices and the fancy grocery rates aren't going to pay for themselves. All of that along with my rent to my crazy roommate. Anyway, fast forward, and I dragged myself and my silver Sentra to a grocery store that wasn't too far away from my complex. The incident was short, simple, and very common. I was pulling into a space at the same time as another car. It was a larger tan SUV. At first, I didn't really get a good look at the people inside the vehicle, and without thinking of any circumstance, I pulled in. Now in hindsight, I probably should have submitted and just given the spot to them. However, it was a really long shift, I was tired, and the spot was really close to the groceries doors. It was dark outside after all, and I figured the shorter walk would be safer. Now, to this day, I can't tell you what possessed me to stay put. Normally I would have gotten out and just put my headphones in without thinking, but this time, something stopped me. I looked back and I noticed the car had parked diagonally behind me. I could easily look back from the driver's side window and see them, and they pulled in so their faces were towards me. There were 2 very oversized men in baseball caps, just looking at me. There was something in the stare that kept me locked solid in the vehicle. I locked all of my doors and kept looking back every so often. They kept their eyes glued on my every move. I felt a terrible feeling wash over me as I then put the car in reverse and exited the lot. Not much of a story, I know, but I really do wonder what the 2 large men would want with a 5'3" petite woman like myself. The worst part of the story is that I really believe I saw the same men in a different parking lot just a few days later. They were parked already and took no note of me, as I luckily sped off into the night. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm back at Enterprise. Well, it's the day I have to give the car back, and I'm dreading it. I should also mention that I really don't know anyone in the state of California, and I'm 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I knew that I'd be stranded at home from then on out until I found a car. Sitting at home without any weed can really be a major crisis in a time like this. The one lucky part of this story is there happens to be a dispensary about 3 minutes away from my complex. Well, I decided to take one for the team and walk there. I just head to toe, covering my skin. I also made sure to leave early so that there would be more people around. I even had a friend from home on the phone with me the entire time. Unfortunately for me though, this plan fell flat on its face. I walked 1 minute down the road to a gas station, and when I paused at the crosswalk, a dirty-looking man in a white truck made eye contact with me. His windows were rolled down, and he was paused at the stoplight. This is another time where I can be thankful for my intuition, as I just felt something wasn't right about that look in his eye. I stayed out until he drove out of sight, and then made my way, passing the crosswalk. I realized that the man had doubled back and followed me by truck. He made a U-turn and everything. His eyes were still attached to me as I ran back towards the busy gas station and through the busy crosswalk. To my amazement, he turned around yet again, just as I had. He passed me, but not before making that same eye contact with me again as he drove off. This time I stayed put and called for an Uber. Sometimes it's just more worth it to shell out the extra $6. Overall, the time here's been pretty rough, and I really wouldn't recommend moving to the state unless you have people you know here and a good place to live. Please stay safe out there.
I spend my days as a humble worker at 7-Eleven. More specifically, I was a store manager and franchise owner. I was no software engineer or doctor, and while my family did have their opinions on what I did for a living, my job paid rather well. I was a very different man in my past, but deciding to go the route of franchising a store was a more hands-on career path that mostly kept me in check. It was a low-stress but high-labor job, and that was honestly perfect for me. The job was almost therapeutic to me. It gave me something to take care of, something to look forward to every day. Of course, I couldn't do this alone. Working with me in my daytime shifts were workers Molly and Adam. Molly and Adam were young. They were working there to pay off their college tuition. We all considered ourselves like a family to each other. Molly, Adam, and I grew super close to each other in our time working there. They were like the kids I never had, and this naturally made me a little protective over them. We would always encounter weird or upset customers, and it was usually me who had to stand up for them. I didn't want anything to happen to them. They were so young. Nothing bad had happened to Molly or Adam yet, and I was grateful for that. But one early morning, that changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I want to say the incident occurred around 9 a.m. The sun was out and things seemed to be going normal. This time of day was always peaceful. There was usually never any problems. Eventually, a blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Inside of the car was a rather average-looking middle-aged man. He stepped out of the car and started filling it with gas. While the pump was going, he then proceeded to the front of the store. As per their training, Molly and Adam greeted him. The man just nodded and started walking around the aisles. He then looped back around the store, approached Molly, and started flirting with her. Molly was visibly uncomfortable, and while I wanted to go to the back of the store and do my inventory logging, I couldn't do this, not with the man hitting on Molly like that. Adam, however, told me that he could handle the man if he started acting any weirder, and naturally, I trusted him. I reluctantly stepped in the back room and started counting down and logging all the items that were there. While I was doing this, however, I kept looking back towards the man to see what he was doing. It seemed like the man was looking back at me as well. This was odd for a number of reasons. Customers aren't supposed to be this close to the back of the store, and he kept awkwardly peering in through the utility room. To make things worse, every time I looked back, the man started to try and act busy. It was like he was trying to pass time or look natural for some reason. I stepped out of the room and asked the man if I could help him. He seemed to awkwardly and rudely shun me off and keep pacing around the store pretending like he was looking for something. For some reason, I decided to ignore all these red flags and continue my work in the back. Eventually, While Molly was passing by the back room, she whispered to me that the man was making her very uncomfortable. I told her that once I finished with the shelf I was working on, I would quickly go outside and help her. I essentially told her to hang in there and wait behind Adam. It was super confusing what the man even wanted. He seemed to have stopped flirting with Molly completely and was instead focused on trying to peer through the back door for some reason. As annoying as this was, I just wanted to get through my work. I had one last crate of granola bars to log down and I didn't want this weird man to stop that. But that's when I heard a commotion coming from the main room. "Excuse me, sir, you're not allowed to be back there. What are you trying to pull off?" "Call the police, Adam," I heard Molly exclaim right after that. I quickly ran out of the storage room to see what was happening and saw the commotion. The man in the blue car was trying to pull something off. I saw Molly in shock and fear in the corner, and Adam with his fists up standing right in front of her. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I asked the man. Whoa, what kind of place is this? What's even back there? What are you guys hiding?" "Get out of here, the sign clearly says employees only." "You expect me to just sit here and let you get away with this? No way in hell." We were all in complete shock. Adam tried to calm the man down, however. "Sir, we don't need to get violent, okay? You can just calm down and we don't have to— I don't want to hear another word from you psychos." The man snapped back at Adam. Molly started to cry. She was ready to dart out the store. The man then started reaching for his pocket. We had no idea what he was going to pull out. I tackled the man in the back of the shop and screamed at Adam and Molly to just head away and call the police. A few more minutes of us rustling in the utility room occurred. I managed to headlock the man, but he just kept hitting me off. After a few more minutes of us rustling and fighting in the back, the cops eventually got there. But sadly, they couldn't find him on the scene. We got the man's face on security camera, and his car was still at the pumps. We had both his face and his license plate on camera. Despite all this, the police just left. They couldn't find any sign of him, and they assumed that he just ran out through one of the other back doors. As the cops left, I made sure to dump the man's body right next to the first. As I mentioned before, I was a different man in my past. This job really changed me. It seemed like the man in the blue car clearly noticed the other body I had. Normally it's pretty well hidden. Not even Molly or Adam could find it. But I guess one of the legs must have been sticking out or something like that while I was moving stuff around. I re-looked at the security footage to make sure there was no evidence left behind. It seemed like the man wasn't reaching for a gun or a knife. He was reaching for his phone to call the police. I really didn't want it to be this way, but he knew my secret. The man was now part of my collection. Molly and Adam still have no idea what happened, and you bet I'm planning to keep it that way. They can't find out anything about my past. If they did, they'd be shattered. For now, my secret remains safe from the public eye, and I will ensure no one remembers that day.